Okay, welcome to the third round of the Italian Youth Debate Championship. My name is Andrea and I'll be chairing this panel for today's debate. I ask my fellow adjudicators to introduce themselves briefly.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Irene Bianchi.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Aurora Targa.
Thank you. The motion for this round reads, this House would require all foods already on the market to undergo the European safety assessment currently mandated for novel foods. Now, I ask also the teams to introduce themselves, starting from the first proposition speaker.
I'm Alessandro Nardulli, and I'm the first speaker of the proposition team.
The second. Yeah.
I'm Giada Ferrulli, and I'm the second speaker for the proposition team.
I'm Alessia Mari, and I'm the third speaker of the proposition team.
Okay, opposition.
I'm Noemi Vullo, and I'm the first speaker of the opposition team.
I'm Paola Traversa, and I'm the second speaker and also reply speaker for today of opposition team.
I'm Giuseppe Cascio, and I'm the third speaker of the opposition team.
Who's going to do the reply for proposition?
I am.
Okay. Okay, let me set my timer. All right, if everyone's ready, I call upon the first proposition speaker.
Yes, all right. So, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, judges. Good evening, opposition team. I'm Alessandro Nardulli, and I'm the first speaker of the proposition team. And today, with my teammates, Giada and Alessia, we will show you the reason why we believe that all foods already on the market should undergo to the European Safety Assessment currently mandated for novel foods, regulated by Regulation 2015-2283. But before moving on and show you our thesis, let's start analyzing the term of this debate. With the word undergo, we mean to go through a process, while with novel foods, we mean that the food had not been consumed to a significant degree by humans in the European Union before 15 May 1997, when the first regulation on novel food came into force. Novel food can be newly developed, innovative food, and food produced using new technologies and production processes, as well as food which is or has been traditionally eaten outside of the EU. The underlying principle underpinning novel foods in the European Union are that novel food must be safe for consumer, properly labeled so as not to mislead consumer if novel food is intended to replace another food. It must not differ in a way that the consumption of the novel food will be nutritionally disadvantageous for the consumer. But the new technologies I was talking about, or also called biotechnologies, are the set of techniques that use living organisms, cells, or biological molecules, such as enzymes or DNA, to develop or improve products and processes useful to humans in fields such as medicine, agriculture, industry, and the environment. The Regulation 2015-2283 is the regulation that set the rules for authorizing and controlling novel foods. The first regulation that was set in the 2058-97 regulated novel foods, but it provided for a complex authorization procedure initially managed by individual member states. Authorization were individual. No thanks. Authorization were individual and valid only for the applicant, making the system slow and uneven. But when the Regulation 2015-2283 replaced it, it maintains the same time frame, but introduces a centralized procedure at the European level. EFSA assists Safety and European Commission authorizes. The Union list was established, making authorization valid for all operators. Furthermore, the new regulation expands the categories of novel foods and simplifies the entry of traditional foods from third countries, making the system more modern, efficient, and transparent. The regulation recognizes that changes in technologies, environment, and food production can affect food safety. Therefore, foods that are new or newly... Sorry?
Point.
Yes?
You said the system is efficient. Do you think it will continue to be efficient for the whole market?
Sorry, can you repeat?
You said the system of novel food today is efficient. Do you think it will stay efficient for an enormously bigger market?
We think that we prefer the safety of the people in relation with the efficiency of the system. We think that is more important the safety of the people. But as I was saying, now let's analyze the two theses we're going to present today. The first one says that what has fed humanity safely for centuries can now become an invisible threat. Climate change is transforming food from within, altering its molecular properties and safety. But while the second thesis that Metimis is going to present is that health is not an expense, but it's a saving. Widespread prevention through healthy eating can reduce illness, healthcare costs, and the inefficiencies of systems already under pressure. Now, about the first argument we're analyzing, in recent decades, environmental pollution and climate change have introduced new and profound variables. Yes.
How would these measures have an impact on safety?
Sorry?
How would these measures have an impact on safety for, like, let's say, traditional food?
We're going to analyze this later. I was saying that in recent decades, environmental pollution and climate change have introduced new and profound variables into the relationship between humans and food. For a long time, it was assumed that many foods, thanks to their history of consumption and tradition, were strictly safe for human health. However, today, this certainly can no longer be considered absolute. The environmental conditions in which food are produced, grown, and processed have changed, and with them, their chemical and biological properties can also change. For example, at higher level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, many plants grow faster, but with lower levels of essential nutrients, such as proteins, minerals, and antioxidants. But it happens because the increased CO2 alters plant metabolism and their assimilation of nitrogen and nutrients, changing the chemical composition of food at molecular level. Increasing air pollution, soil degradation, and climate change directly impact the natural process that regulate the growth and composition of the food. This factor can affect the metabolism of living organisms, causing change in the molecular structure of nutrients or the introduction of potentially harmful compounds. Consequently, a food that was once considered safe may now have different characteristics with positive and negative effects on human health. Studies have shown that stimulated climate change conditions with elevated CO2 levels lead to a reduction in protein, iron, and zinc in staple crops such as wheat, corn, and rice of 3 to 17% compared to current conditions. But what else can happen? Soil and water contaminated with heavy metals. No thanks. With heavy metal, arsenic, cadmium, lead, mercury, cause plants to absorb these substances. But why this matters? Because with these elements, and when these elements enter plants, they can not only be present in animal and plant tissues, but also interfere with plant metabolic pathways, altering enzyme, cellular redox process, and nutrient transports. Plants growing in contaminated soils exhibit bioaccumulation of metals such as arsenic and cadmium in their leaves, roots, fruits, and seeds. The absorption of metal can change the chemical composition of plant cells and reduce the efficiency of photosynthesis, protein synthesis, and the metabolism of micronutrients necessary for nutrition equality. This phenomenon is recognized as biomagnification in the food chain. Contaminants increasingly concrete in the tissues of predatory animals and ultimately in humans. The main problem lies in the fact that food control systems are often based on historical assumptions. What has always been consumed without apparent risk continues to be treated as safe. Without full reevaluation in light of changing environmental conditions. This approach, however, is increasingly inadequate in a context where the environment is no longer stable and predictable. Food safety cannot be considered an immutable given. It must be constantly updated based on change in the context in which food is produced. For this reason, we believe it is necessary to adopt a greater precautionary principle. Safety controls should not be reserved exclusively for so-called new or innovative foods, but extended to all foods, including those traditionally considered safe. A broader and more continuous monitoring system would allow the timely identification of any change in food properties, more effectively protecting consumer health. In conclusion, in a world marked by profound environmental change, trust in the past is no longer sufficient to guarantee the safety of the present. Only through extensive and updated preventive control can we ensure that the food we consume continues to be not only familiar, but also truly safe for humans. I'm done.
Thank you for your speech. It lasted 8 minutes and 10 seconds. If the adjudicators are ready, I can call upon the first opposition speaker.
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, honorable judges and proposition team. I'm Noemi Vullo, and I'm the first speaker of the opposition team, so I'd like to start my speech by underlining some criticism about the speech of the first proposition speaker. So let's start from the answer to our POI, where we were asking if this regulation that they're proposing would be efficient if applied to a much larger market, and the answer have been that for them safety is more important than efficiency. But our question is, how can you ever guarantee safety with an inefficient regulation? It's a contradiction, and you're basically giving us the floor to say that this regulation wouldn't be efficient to guarantee the safety. Moreover, he talked about various environmental changes that cause contamination of the soil, so that they change the final product. But we want to underline that the general regulation that is mandated in the status quo gets reassessed periodically. So every change is contained in the new and the reassessed regulation. There is also a logical problem. In fact, the proposition team didn't clarify what where the product during all the steps will be, because if they remain on the market, then they're basically accepting that the history of safe consumption is sufficient, and they are incoherent. Otherwise, if these foods get removed from the market, then it would cause lots of damage to the market. So the motion that they are promoting in both scenarios refuse is either incoherent or socially damaging. And but before we dive into specific harms of this motion, we need to set the term of this debate properly. So let me be clear from the outset. Food safety is vital, but safety is guaranteed not only by how much we regulate, but by how well we regulate. This motion does not give us better regulation, it gives us unnecessary, disproportionate, and economically damaging regulation. It's our value that this is the value that our three arguments land on. The first one is the lack of necessity. The second one is no justification for stricter rules, and I'm going to expand this too in a few minutes. And the third one will be expanded by the second speaker of our team, Paola, later. So let's start with our first point, the lack of necessity. Novel food assessment exists to fill a specific regulatory gap. So foods that are insufficiently studied or foods lacking of historical consumption data in the European Union before the 1997. Therefore, forcing all traditional food through the novel food process does not fill any real safety gap, because there isn't. Indeed, the EU has history in being the first in the world for security and efficient controls over the market and the production side. It's the General Food Law Regulation which establishes the principle of food safety, risk analysis, traceability, and rapid alert system, monitoring structures that repeatedly prove their effectiveness. Out of the 4.2 billion tons of food placed into the EU market each year, only 0.015% trigger a notification from the RASFF, which stands for Rapid Alert System for Food and Feed, and which is the main tool that collects food alerts in the EU. This shows how the current standard regulation is working just right, and there's no need to implement a stricter and way too difficult to handle regulation like the one the proposition team is promoting. We are going to get deeper into these problems in the following arguments. But if the General Food Law Regulation isn't showing any signs of weakness, but it is instead proving itself valid, and if we can deny that scientific progress is already impacting standard food, as you said, then the General Regulation, which regulates the standard food, proves his ability to tackle those controversies too. But even if measures already applied generally on food were to be modified, extending to all foods already on the market, the novel food regulations would still be ineffective. Why? Because their purpose is not to re-evaluate products that are already well regulated and consistently monitored, but to address new specific gaps that concern novel food, because they are new, insufficiently studied, or lacking of long-term data in the European Union. So let's move on to our second point, which is no justification for stricter rules. Well, this value is simple. A regulation must be adopted only if it is proportionate, evidence-based, and target to real risks. A policy should only be adopted if it solves a genuine problem and does so efficiently. Moreover, mandating universal assessments violates proportionality. It treats well-studied food that have been consumed for a long time in the European Union, whose technologies, however new they may be, were already tested as if they were experimental substances. Public authorities also have a duty, which is to allocate resources efficiently. Requiring years of toxicological carcinogenicity testing for foods that have never shown any signal of new risk and known risk are already managed isn't justified. This is not or legitimate use of public funds. I think it's protected time, I'm sorry. In the European regulation, the European Union regulation already covers new technologies, new additives, new pesticides, new materials, and any significant change requires a reassessment, regardless of whether it is a novel or a traditional food. The risk here is to reduce a measure to a time-wasted regulation, because more controls means more time spent. The proposal would therefore impose on substantial regulatory burdens without delivering any meaningful public health benefit. To conclude, this debate is not about whether food safety matters, because it does. It is about whether this motion meaningfully improves it, and the answer is no. We have shown that the current EU food safety law is already effective, and for this reason we oppose to the motion, because the evidence shows that there is no justification for requiring all existing foods to undergo the EU novel food assessment, meaning this proposal would impose unnecessary and disproportionately burdens on products that are already safe. This is the end of my speech. Thank you.
Thank you. Your speech lasted 8 minutes and 30 seconds. If the other adjudicators are ready, we can call upon the second proposition speaker.
Just one sec, please. Ready.
Okay, my speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Honorable judges, I'm Giada Ferrulli, the second speaker for the proposition team. Let me begin with showing you the real reasons why the opposition team's interpretation of the motion is already misleading. Ladies and gentlemen, our opponents have just described us our society where speed is a synonymous of danger. Thus, I feel obligated to ask you a crucial question. Would you prefer being constantly frightened of the only thing that allows you to breathe with your own legs or walk with your own legs, rather than enjoying food and feel comfortable and satisfied with that? Well, that's the reason why innovation and tradition should both be controlled properly. That's not just a childish tantrum, but that's the pillar of your life. That's the pillar of everyone's life, because speed can be placed before control and speed can be placed before safety. However, I'm going to talk to you about concrete facts that Europe cares for its citizens' health, and following the precaution system, nobody is allowed to commercialize products without proper testing.
UI.
No, thanks. In the USA, instead, several foods or drugs are sold without enough controls, and we actually can perfectly see the results of this situation, because 42% of the population suffers from obesity, as the Gallup, that is a private organization with a statistical survey shows us, or 51 million people in North America suffer from diabetes, according to the International Diabetes Federation, or to say nothing of the increasing amount of people that are suffering from cancer. So this is a great way to demonstrate how traditional foods aren't safe anymore, because this is a current terrible issue. All these problems, or this spreading amount of sicknesses are connecting to the climate change, to the UV rays, to pollution, parasites, and food contamination. And we can't stand emotionless in front of these problems, but we have to preserve our future. We have to gain as much control as possible, because a lack of tests means a lack of control, and a lack of control means chaos. And we can't accept a lack of awareness related to what the things that we introduce in our body, because we are what we eat. And losing the control about what we eat means losing the control of our life, and means becoming tested. Because, dear judges, this is what the opposition team really wants, to put humans at the same level as test animals, and my team find this absolutely unacceptable. However, you may think that control is too expensive. Well, I have to ask you a question. Do you really think that our health and our sentences may have a price? Well, I don't think so. And we're always wasting our money on wars, on weapons, or on the newest technological device. So what is missing is not the money, but the willpower to embrace a fair struggle. And we have to start building our future in this moment. We have to start in this moment by preserving our future and controlling the innovation in as much control as possible, and not letting chaos destroy our breakable balance. Well, what the opposition team is too blind to realize is the fact that control will be our real, useful weapon to overcome several problems, and ironically, one of them will be actually the economic one, because nowadays our society is afflicted by several sicknesses that are related to unhealthy products or toxic substances that we introduce in our body like every day without even being aware of it. So investing money on controlling procedures will definitely decrease. Yes, okay, tell me.
How can you guarantee the application of a regulation if you are admitting that it's economically impossible?
What can you repeat, please?
How can you guarantee the application of such regulation if you're basically accepting that it's economically impossible to apply?
Okay, We'll talk about that later. However, I don't say that. I will talk about that later. However, I don't think that what I said before is that what's missing is not the money, but the willpower to embrace a fair struggle, because we have to find a way to preserve our safety. However, our biological way to preserve the safety and to face the constant changings, that the constant transformations that our planet is a victim of because of the climate change and all the pollution and all the stuff, is the evolution. However, the evolution is a slow and gradual process, and if there are sudden and immediate transformations, we don't have enough time to adapt to the environment. We don't have enough time to change. And if we don't have enough time to change, we will never be able to survive. However, human life human nature in general doesn't let us give up easily. So in this battle for survival, we have to embrace all our weapons, and science must be one of them, as an inspector that will guarantee our safety by embracing this hard situation and controlling both innovative and traditional foods. Because the point is that we can't trust traditional foods anymore, because as I said before, and as Alessandro said before, the planet, the environment, everything is constantly changing. We are changing, our necessities are changing, and also the molecular constitution of foods. No thanks. And their values, the nutritional values, are constantly changing. So the traditional food that we consider as our allies may become our worst enemies. So do you really want to be defeated by your enemies, dear judges? Well, I don't think so. And that's the reason why we have to embrace this problematic situation, because if we don't do that, the results will be devastating. I'll present you a concrete example. For example, no thanks. In 2022, Daily Harvest faced a majority health crisis with its French lentil plus leek crumbles that caused severe gastrointestinal issues and liver damage, leading this society to a recall in June, because Tara flour had created several health problems to people who had introduced that food in their bodies because a lack of control, because a lack of tests. And that's a point, that's a great source that shows you how inefficient the controls are, and that we have to gain as much control as possible. However, investing in research and letting researchers take the proper time to conduct controls will decrease the amount of people that are suffering from obesity, allergies, diabetes, cancer, or several other sicknesses, and we must fight against superficiality if we want to win, and failure is not an option. In this way, our whole country will be improved, the future and the dreams of individuals will be safe, as well as the national healthcare sector. Better safe than sorry, right? In Italy, in fact, there is a significant lack of doctors and nurses and a widespread inefficiency of hospitals and medical centers. So the best way to overcome this issue will be tackling the problem at its roots, as it will benefit the economy and the health of the population. The ally that we need is safety. The ally that we need is control. And we have to preserve our future by preserving our health, because health is not an expense, but a saving. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your speech, which lasted 8 minutes and 6 seconds. Okay. Are the judges ready? Okay, so I call upon the second opposition speaker.
Okay, so my speech will start in 3, 2, 1, now. Good afternoon, honorable judges and fellow debaters. I'm Paola Traversa, and I would like to start my speech criticizing what the proposition team has just said. So, first of all, you have not demonstrated the inefficacy of today's already existing regulations. You haven't even replied to our POIs when we asked that. So, second of all, you haven't even clarified how these measures will have an impact on the security problem that you have raised. And you also talked about OGMs without specifying that OGMs are not novel foods. They undergo the same regulations that there already are for traditional food, let's say. So most of them, in fact, already existed before 1997. Then you also talked about safety, but we are not saying that the long history of consumption of traditional food is presented as a guarantee of absolute safety, but as a body, it is presented as a body of accumulated observational evidence that significantly reduces scientific uncertainty and therefore does not justify novel food level testing. So, as we've already said, as our first speaker has already said, there are already measures that so that ensure
Right.
continuous safety checks. No, sorry. So that okay, that ensure continuous safety checks on all the ingredients. So, second of all, the safety of traditional food is already guaranteed by official control, and traditional food do not need studies because it is assumed that they are safe. Therefore, the only
Right.
reason, no, thank you. Um, would be unsafe is, as you said, so like heavy metals or additives, let's say. So, but EU already has several regulations to prevent this risk that get reassessed as the risks change. So, then you also talked about pollution, but again, you haven't specified how pollution is linked with the production of novel foods and how these measures would like help pollution. Let alone the costs that you haven't even mentioned. So, don't you think that the economic impact will be disastrous, as you said? So, you are basically talking about equality, simply passing by equity. Novel food regulations were created because they carry new risks. So I will now move on to our third argument, that is market-wide economic pressure. So, this motion identifies a real issue that our team clearly assesses and recognizes. So, the long-standing and complex debate on food regulation, but attempting to solve it through shedding light on the real impact of these measures cannot become the source of deeper and more damaging problems for producers, consumers, and the entire EU food market. That, I'll just give you some figures, generates yearly a turnover of 1.2 trillion euros. So,
PUI.
yes.
So what you mean is that the economic will be more important than people's health, because what I've said during my speech is that the controls will have a great economic impact because of the lack of sicknesses. So
No.
I think that
No, we are not, absolutely not saying that. We are saying that the measures already guarantee safety. There's no need for safety. But thank you for this assertion. I will now move on to my argument. So, we've already mentioned that regulatory costs for submitting a novel food application are uniformly high, and there's no distinction between small and large producers. As a result, high and inflexible fees act as a barrier to entry, enabling only major firms to remain competitive. And this leads to a concentration of market power, reduced competition, higher prices, and fewer possibilities for consumers. So the EU itself recognizes this issue, the weight of this issue, evidenced by the numerous briefings that have been produced since 2015 to address the persistent problem of excessive dossier costs. So the EU itself recognizes, Europe would fall more than ever in the big multinationals, and the same multinationals that then produce in other countries and let European market and economy bend on its knees. So, how could we even consider extending the system that already proves fragile when applied to a much smaller sector like novel foods to the entire food market? So, let's now analyze all the impacts that this economic pressure can produce, not speculating like your team is doing, but looking at real evidence with the already existing novel food market. So, even if the market wouldn't be controlled by big companies, costs would still boost products' prices, shifting the problem onto consumers. Because unsubstantiated heavy regulations means more tests. More tests means higher costs. Therefore, prices would not only rise significantly, but universally. So, what the motion is proposing is not the introduction of a safe regulation for the European food market and for consumers, but an economically unsustainable and structurally inappropriate measure for an enormous market like this. Therefore, judges, the proposal is to refuse for the sake of producers, markets, and consumers. So, not to mention the impact on exports, where European products will be pushed out of the global markets in favor of cheaper non-EU competitors. So, to conclude, we have demonstrated through our arguments that extending novel foods measures to all foods already on the market would violate the principles that underpin EU's current regulations, that are proportionality, adequacy, and scientific evidence. So, and also how your proposal, by disregarding these fundamental principles, would ultimately undermine the coherence and effectiveness of the European Union's regulatory framework. That's the end of my speech. Thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you for your fine speech, which lasted 8 minutes and 8 seconds. Okay, if the judges are ready, I call upon the third proposition speaker for the last constructive on-site proposition.
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Hello everyone, good evening dear judges and the opposition team. I'm Alessia, I am the third speaker of the proposition team. And before I start my speech, I want to say something about what the opposition team said about what we said. They talked about how the general regulation usually rely on periodic checks and historical safe data, so is already efficient, but this means that they often detect problems only after the contamination and when it has already occurred. And they also said that we didn't explain how pollution is linked to the risks of our health is contaminating the food we are eating, but this is not true because we have demonstrated. Our first and second speaker said because according in fact to European alert system, a significant rise in food contamination notification was observed in 2025 with heavy metals found above legal threshold in common products such as rice, nuts, and seeds that are the so-called traditional food that we are eating every day. This shows that the food historically so-called traditional that are considered safe can now carry invisible chemical risks linked to degraded soils, contaminated water, and many other things. So without update control, because what we are proposing is to expand this regulation, this risk can only become visible when it's already too late, when the damage is done. And in recent years, in fact, several countries have faced serious public health crises caused by food contamination, leading to hospitalization, long-term health damage, and in some cases, loss of life. Because the opposition team is not thinking about the damage of it, because how this would affect the health industry. In fact, what our speaker said is that the opposition team said that this will cost so much and this will be a damage for the industry, but we're not thinking about how the cost will be giant if there will be a contamination. Let's do a quick example. Let's think about the COVID-19. It was a virus, yes, but there was a damage for the economy. We stayed at home for so much time, and it took so much time to find a vaccine, a solution for this thing. So this cost should be seen as an investment in prevention, not waste. Ignoring this control would expose consumer and business to far greater risks, including chemical contamination and public health crises, all of which carry enormous cost. This regulation is therefore not a financial burden, but a measure to protect public health and maintain market stability. Also, we said that today we are debating not abstraction, but we are debating the concrete reality of what we are eating every day after we are sitting down at the table. Can we really keep going claiming that traditional alone guarantee food safety when scientific evidence and recent events clearly prove otherwise? The world around us is changing. We are also hearing about climate change, environment pollution, and increased pressure on supply chains that are altering the composition and the safety of our food. Also, I want to do another example. In 2025 in Italy, yes.
You're linking lots of problem, and it's okay, but how will the introduction of this regulation solve all these problems?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Do you want me to repeat?
Yes.
Sorry. You've linked lots and lots of problems, and it's okay, but how will the introduction of this regulation solve all of these problems?
This regulation is going to solve the problem, because let's think, without this regulation on all the traditional food that were regulated with the 1997 general regulation, we are going to live in a world with this contamination. Many food are changing. Our second speaker talked about it. We have demonstrated how many types of food are changing. Let's do a quick example. For example, studies have shown that simulated climate change conditions with elevated CO2 levels led to a reduction in protein, iron, and zinc in staple crops such as wheat, corn, and rice of 3% and 17% compared to current condition. And this is the example that the first speaker of my team said, because we know that protein, iron, and zinc are fundamental in for our wealth and for our health and for our alimentation. No, thanks. So we also said that not focusing of these risks will lead to global contamination or just to risks for the people's health, and this will cost so much. Will be a giant cost for the hospitals, because each of these episodes is not just, as I said, a human tragedy, but also an enormous giant cost for national healthcare system that are already under strain. I made the example of COVID-19, but it's just one example. Let's think about the economic damage that we had in that year. We stay at home, so people couldn't work because smart work, yes, was efficient, but not so much, no thanks, to cover all the damage that were made. So this is where our thesis come to play. We demonstrated how prevention is not an expense, but a saving. Investing in food safety controls means reducing the incidence of food poisoning, allergies, and chronic disease, easing the burden on hospital and healthcare services. Also, I want to say that this system could be slow because the opposition team said that this safety will be slow. This will be a slow process, more slow, but we are preferring this slowness to the safety of the people. And I want to, in the end, ask this question to the judges, because do we really want to keep reacting to emergency, paying the highest possible price, or do we really want to do something before the damage is done? Extending scientific control to so-called traditional food doesn't mean attacking tradition. It means protecting it. It means recognizing that in a rapidly changing environment, because food safety can no longer rely solely on the past. So we have the science, modern science today. We can know how mycotoxin, heavy metals, and nutritional alteration, we can know them before they reach the consumers. And with this, I want to end my speech. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Your speech lasted 8 minutes and 5 seconds. Okay, are the judges ready? Okay. So let's call upon the third opposition speaker for the last constructive speech of this debate. Is the third speaker ready? Okay, you can start when you want.
1 second. I'm Giuseppe Prakash, I'm the first speaker of the opposition team, and I would like to start my speech analyzing which values we analyzed in this debate. I think the first one is about the concept of security. Your team thunders about the fact that human lives matter more than money or efficiency. But your point of view is so narrow that becomes fallacious. Our team has instead a general view of the topic we are talking about. The stability of a market isn't just the interest of companies. The economic problem isn't just the interest of companies, but is the interest of consumers. Your principle is to destroy, to crash a food market just to ensure security. But moreover, you made a list of problems that you said are related to the solution. But first of all, you talked about diabetes, obesity, and so on. But first of all, these are all problems that aren't related with the novel food regulation, because novel food regulation is a regulation that analyzes the pre-market process. For example, ultra-processed food like a McDonald's hamburger wouldn't even be considered in the novel food regulation. because in itself, it's not dangerous. What's dangerous about it, it's the continuous consuming of it. So you wouldn't even solve these problems. You would crash a market, you would crash an economy just for not even solving the problems you are raising. This point connects with our first argument, where we explained how our current regulation is working just right. We took data to prove that. We talked about the RASFF that covers the trigger alert, the alert system. And it shows that the system now, it's working. Your first speaker said that our data is not complete because the damage is visible when it's already done. But now I say, okay, but then that's the damage that is done, that's the damage that is visible, and is the 0.015%. So it's still nothing. Moreover, what you are proposing is you are presenting a world where we are living a food crisis in your point of view, but this is not proven by any data. And you are comparing it to COVID-19. But we can truly see the connection between these two problems. COVID-19 was a pandemic problem that invested all the earth. You talked about prevention. Prevention can prevent. We'd have to take prevention to avoid another COVID-19. But what our team is failing to understand, and you also failed to answer when we made this point, is how this novel food regulation can solve these problems, because it can't. Going on another value that our debate is revolving on is the value of efficiency. Your team has clearly said that security is more important than efficiency. But how can you ensure safety without efficiency? You're accepting to have a chaotic system where real risks won't even be tackled because the system is not efficient. There could be too many requests, too many dossiers that had to be studied, too many controls that had to be done, controls that are even unnecessary. So you are overloading a system, making it inefficient, therefore reducing security, not boosting it. Our team defends the status quo that proves itself efficient. And I can even add another evidence to this, that in 2023, only 1.2% of the samples exceeded the European Union limits of heavy metals like lead, cadmium, and mercury. And this also proves how, when you talked about pollution with the heavy metals, okay, it's a problem that is starting to impact all the food system. But the solution, first of all, today we are not still seeing these enormous effects that could justify such a risk of destruction of a market. And what you fail to understand is that the economic point of view in this debate is central. Without a food market that works, people can't even buy food, or it becomes really, really more expensive, not only on the single food, but universally. You could create a famine in name of security. So I let the judges decide which of the two problems today, with the data we are bringing, it's more dangerous. You said that today controls are inefficient, but again, you didn't bring any data on this. You didn't you said that you can't not control food. You are bringing this regulation saying that posing it like today, we haven't any control on food, but that's just not true. We have the general food regulation that is working efficiently. European Union has 7 of the top 10 nations in the world for food security, and that's another evidence that acceptable.
I'm sorry, you say that the general regulation is more efficient, but if there is so efficient as you're saying, what there is so contamination of food in our world today? We brought many examples of it.
First of all, we are talking about the world, we are talking about Europe, and second of all, without any data that you can bring to us, I don't know how to answer, like it's a statement. And I'd like to continue saying that I would like to conclude saying that the debate, what you're debating today, is about a status quo that is proving being efficient and working just right. We are not saying that it doesn't need modernization. We said that general food regulation reassesses periodically. So it's a model that is flexible to the problems you are even talking about. So where's the need of a new regulation, a stricter regulation, a more difficult regulation, and a damaging regulation? That's our question. Thank you.
Thank you. Your speech lasted 8 minutes and 27 seconds. If the judges are ready.
Just 1 second, please.
Yeah. Okay. Then we can move on to the opposition reply speech.
Yes, just 1 second. Okay. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1, now. So, good afternoon again, fellow debaters and honorable judges. So we've now come to the end of this debate where we have discussed about a very important topic. So that is the long-standing and complex debate on food regulation. So during this debate, 3 main points of clash have emerged that are safety, efficiency, and economic impact. So for the first point, safety, the proposition team has just stated during the whole debate that there's a problem without actually giving evidence and reason of that, with no link to the motion. The opposition team instead has stated that and proved that the system already guarantees security through the large variety of regulations that EU applies to the food market in general. Second of all, efficiency. And on this point, the 2 teams basically agreed on the fact that it will be inefficient. But opposition team has proved that regulation exists because novel food carry with them the new risks or are not sufficiently studied. Therefore, applying this norm will purely be unuseful. Proposition team instead has kept defending this motion without bringing any evidence of actual necessity or field of efficacy. So their floor is just falling. The economic impact. So proposition team has repeatedly minimized this aspect during the debate, putting it in under safety in a scale of matter, proving its inapplicability from this point of view. So, opposition team has instead evidenced how extending this measure would let the European economy bend on its knees, generating inequalities between small and large producers. So, about the scenarios, proposition team best scenarios. Uh, for proposition team best scenario. So opposition has shown that this policy confuses the appearance of caution with actual protection, because these foods already have long history of safe consumption and are covered by existing safety laws. So it will just force all existing European foods through the European Novel Food Assessment. In their instead worst scenario, it will be we have far more serious and more situation. This policy will place enormous financial and bureaucratic burdens on small producers. In opposition with scenario, instead, the status quo remains in place, and while isolated risks continue to be addressed through existing mechanisms. In our best scenario, we are preserving a food safety system that is already among the strongest in the world. So, proposition team treats the European food market as a perfectly healthy patient. One who already undergoes hundreds of rigorous tests to ensure its well-being. Yet, despite being fit as a fiddle, merely the hypothetical chance, completely unsubstantiated, of an undetected disease leads the proposition team to give it the heaviest, most intrusive treatment imaginable. So, judges, proposition team is not proposing prevention. They are simply overreacting. There is no real purpose, and the risk is to do more harm than good. So that's the end of my speech. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech. It lasted 4 minutes and 14 seconds. So if the judges are ready. Okay, let's hear it from the reply speaker of proposition.
Okay. My speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, we're getting closer to the end of this magnificent and quite vivid debate. As Cicero affirmed, word is the real weapon of virtuous man, and as a weapon that's involved in a fight. Every fight is a winner, dear judges, and the winner of this debate can be anyone different from the proposition team. The points of clash of this debate have been speed, economic impact, changes, and efficiency. So let me analyze each of them. Speed is a weapon, and as a weapon, it has the power to hurt or to benefit others using it. It may be a useful ally, provided that it doesn't become a synonym of superficiality. We have perfectly demonstrated which is the cure to superficiality: control. While the opposition team has sustained a work characterized by uncertainties and difficulties that can be accepted, they place speed over safety and have promoted a poison called danger. Then we have economic impact. The opposition team has clearly misunderstood that the most productive investment will be on the healthcare sector, both practically and ethically. Controlling food will decrease the medical expenses, and this must be our aim if we want to improve the economy as well as general well-being. We have explained it clearly instead. Another crucial point is definitely the constant change and transformations that our world is a victim of because of pollution and climate change. They have an impact on nutritional values of food, impact that must be recognized and taken under control, change that the opposition team seems to deny. Last but not least, efficiency. Everything in nature aims to be as efficient as possible. But what may happen if nature, because of immediate transformations, won't be able to guarantee us order? Well, we have to replace it with science, but science may become an enemy without enough control. On one hand, our aim is avoiding this dramatic situation by promoting carefulness and consciousness. On the other hand, the opposition team's interpretation of the motion provides a significant lack of awareness and consequently danger on our honorable judges. They have repeatedly said that the actual regulation is efficient. But how do they explain the increasing sicknesses and food contamination that our third speaker has explained? Thus, our team has described a world where science is not risk, but a source. Food is not scary, but enjoyable, and safety is not a doubt, but a guarantee. For the proposition team, health will not be a dream anymore, but reality. Speed will be an ally, innovation will be safe, and efficiency will definitely be certain, honorable judges. The opposition team instead propose a world where our only certainty is uncertainty. Do you really want to be compared to test animals? Do you really think that losing control will be the key for success? Well, if we don't adapt to the environment will defeat us, and several issues, instead of being solved, will be amplified. The Latin used to say, mens sana in corpore sano. But if we follow the opposition team's interpretation of the motion, our body will be contaminated and our mind will be damaged in every meaning. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, control won't be a limitation, but a way to gain freedom. Freedom to introduce substances and foods and without fear. Freedom to break the chains of uncertainties, and freedom to finally enjoy life. Thus, the proposition team deserves victory because we have made this motion part of us and because we lead humanity to reach freedom. We are what we eat, and we are not a test animals. We are humans. Thanks.
Thank you for your speech. It lasted 3 minutes and 41 seconds. I suggest you a round of applause for this debate virtually, even though we're not in the same room. Congratulations. And we can move to the other room as adjudicators. I will interrupt